Hello and welcome to the final session of today. It's gone so quickly. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, we're going to be taking a look at this being the perfect time to capitalise on the positivity of the high street and what a changing narrative means for us all. We've got a panel of experts here. Let me introduce them. In the middle, we've got Alex Schlagman, founding partner for SaveTheHighStreet.org. The organisation has a new vision for the high street and is led by a dedicated team, an advisory board of more than 200 high street businesses and industry experts, champions, etc. Next we've got Faye Cannings, and Faye is the Senior Inward Investment Manager at the London Borough of Waltham Forest. She's got more than 20 years experience in urban regeneration, community investment and small business growth in the public and private sector. And last but by no means least is Tanisha Rafudin, founder and creative director at Concept Culture. Tanisha founded Concept Culture out of a desire to combine her passion for placemaking and storytelling. She advises clients on strategic branding for place and corporate brands within the built environment and is a trained architect. Guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you along today. Now, as before, there's going to be a short Q&A session at the end of the debate, so please do feel free, put your hand up, ask a question, share some thoughts. We love interaction, so please feel free to do that. And of course, please do also turn your mobiles to silent if you haven't done so already, or reaching for the pockets there. Great stuff. Okay, so let's start with the bigger picture. With the outlook for 2025 generally positive for commercial property, what's driving this renewed optimism? Alex, let's go to you first. There's certainly positivity in London, but is this sentiment reflected outside of the capital and around the UK? Second-tier towns, they're struggling a little bit, aren't they?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we reflect on a lot here at SaveTheHighStreet.org is that some of the big challenges that have faced high streets, in some cases for decades, are actually, ironically, some of their great opportunities. So we talked a lot about the disruption of high streets due to e-commerce, and now we're rolling out these incubator offerings in local areas which give brands a chance to apply to win short periods of rent-free space and support to launch their business before moving on to longer leases and license agreements. And so many of the brands that are applying for these competitions are digital-first brands. Then we look at other challenges, such as the vacancy crisis, the amount of voids that we see in some town and shopping centres around the UK. And that presents this amazing opportunity for a whole new generation of entrepreneurs to come through, hopefully with the space and support they need to achieve their potential, whatever that might look like. And then one of the new ones for this year that we spent a lot of time today talking about is artificial intelligence, which,
we will talking about. So that is a question later on. So, okay. I don't want to interrupt you, but yes, we do have a whole question.
But there's a sort of irony where some of the things which are either scary or they've been challenges for the market are ironically becoming opportunities to change high streets for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Faye, how are people, tenants, landlords, shoppers, feeling in Waltham Forest?
I think generally they're very excited and optimistic. Waltham Forest has gone through a lot of change and growth. So it's a very sort of buoyant borough, very much in terms of, new investment coming in and our very ambitious local plan and targets around housing, workspaces, commercial spaces, etc. So, the borough is in a very positive position in terms of that growth. I think as part of that, we've seen a lot of kind of natural, quite sort of fluid growth around, the town centres. And it's been I think there's a real positivity and some, really innovative, exciting, new offers coming through to the high streets. Obviously, you've got a lot of, new residents moving into the area as well as obviously existing residents that want, that sort of that vibrant, kind of newness to the high streets and town centres. We do a lot around our kind of town centre frameworks in order to kind of really drive that as well and embed that, within our kind of, major sites and high street action plans and so forth. And, a range of different examples where, we've maximised opportunities around empty units through public sector funding, created various, different types of offers. So meanwhile spaces, loads of different examples in the borough where we've created these spaces for smaller retailers, disruptors, independents to come in and really try to kind of choreograph that as a local authority. As well as I think I see a lot of, because the borough is a very creative borough, there's a huge amount of micro businesses, SMEs. I think they're the kind of the 90% of the businesses are micro businesses. And there's a lot of sort of grassroots proactivity really, where those businesses have, often kind of taken the plunge and sort of sought out those opportunities in spaces that where we've kind of matched that demand, or they've decided to, literally take on units themselves. And a lot of them kind of co-create and create a very sort of supported ecosystem.
Great. Tanisha, how are your clients feeling at the moment?
Excited, I would say. And also, to Alex's point, I think we're at a time where the high street is going through a revival. And as we've heard today, a lot of it is not just about retail. We're now going to our high street and our town centres to experience culture, community, and connection. And it's a really exciting time. And there's so many emerging brands, the digital first brands that are now moving into physical spaces. So I'd say we're all very excited to see what the next couple of years will look like.
Yeah, this leads me on to my next point, actually. One of the challenges for the high street and shopping centres is how we use empty space. How do we turn those voids into engaging, profit-making spaces? Tanisha, what are the important foundations for making space work when perhaps it hasn't before? I'm talking about placemaking, perhaps pre-love being a huge trend, that kind of thing.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. It's about placemaking or place shaping. There's this narrative around a place already exists, and then we come in and we shape it. But I think it's starting with what's already existing, what's the heart of the story, the people, the local residents, the businesses that are already existing in that space. How can we respect what's already there, but amplify that story, or maybe reshape that story and share it with a wider audience? So I would say start with the story, start with the place, and work with the local community. Like Faye has said, there's great scope now, and there's really good community engagement programs out there. So when you're thinking about activating the place and promoting the space, get the local business is involved, get local artists involved, get the local creative community involved, and co-design the space with them or co-create the space with them. That will give them a sense of ownership, that will foster civic pride, and they will in turn help and support you. Like we've heard, today throughout the day, it's all about the customer and the people at the end of the day. So I would say actively engage with the local community.
Alex, what would you add to that?
I think we've been, as an industry, we've talked a lot about conceptually what we do with space, whether it's small spaces, big empty department stores, fragmentedly owned high streets with void challenges, and I think where we look at this as the kind of opportunity ahead is less about needing to reinvent the thinking. And it's amazing. All of these points are fantastic, but we've talked as an industry about it for many years now. It's now about the economics of delivery. It's now about how do we actually make change happen and make it make sense economically for everybody involved? How do we become less reliant for Meanwhile Space on local authorities to provide those funding and provide sustainable commercial operations that can live on beyond, a UK SPF funding window? And so for us, what's really exciting is, how do we start to work really well as an industry? And you touched on this community engagement, because everybody has a role to play and everybody benefits from good changes happening in a local economy. And so if you can really tap into who are these key stakeholders, influencers, change makers that have a vested interest influence, reach and distribution and become much more of a distributed team. You don't have to pay local community champions to get behind good things. They do it because they love to do it. But the key is, how do you mobilize that type of support? And then once that's on the other side of it, when it comes to the big spaces, us three have spoken a lot about the future of these large empty units and what that could look like. When it comes to those things, is how do you get the right kind of skills and capabilities around the table? There's some fantastic operators in the room, but who's going to bring loads of small businesses to the table? Who's going to build those partnerships with public-private sector? What role is local government playing within this? And how do you build an operating system that's sustainable and profitable for these mixed-use destinations that are emerging in large voids? So for us, it's about economics now. We're at that phase of the journey as an industry.
And talk's great, but ultimately you want action, don't you?
Action's the key.
Yeah. Faye, what's Waltham Forest Council doing to re-energise its retail spaces? How's it working with tenants and advisors to get stores let? And what initiatives have played a part?
Sure. Obviously I touched on some examples before of how we've actively sort of worked with our town centre action plans to sort of identify the vacant spaces on in our high streets and sort of key areas. And with that, sort of actively reach out to landlords to kind of understand why the spaces are vacant and how we can try and kind of, curate that conversation with them to kind of tap into some of those vacant spaces. It can be difficult because obviously ownership is very fragmented. That we've had several fantastic, case studies where, we've been able to kind of work with the landlords who either kind of put pressure on them to look at best use of that space and how they can work with, local businesses to unlock it and be more flexible. I think that's obviously key is, how can we as a local authority put more onus on landlords to, provide that accessibility. I think when it comes to the sort of the larger kind of mixed use schemes, it's about how obviously we kind of master plan that in from the outset, and we look at how we're factoring in those kind of community spaces or creative spaces or retail spaces and start to, again, kind of be that conduit between, the larger, investors or tenants, and kind of bring those kind of organisations together. We do a lot of, I suppose, more kind of community-led capacity building as well, where, we actively go out and we work with, whether it's the local community investment companies, local retailers, to provide that kind of hands-on kind of advice and guidance and kind of look at, where there's these real pockets of, like Alex was saying, these sort of change agents who are just naturally, really pushing the boundaries. A great example that springs to mind is there's an organisation called Mums Who Build that's, kind of naturally formed in the area. And they've got some really influential people involved. And they've collaborated with the local the major shopping centre, 17 and Central, to create an ongoing kind of like mums session, weekly sessions. So it's kind of how you can bring this fusion together of different types of activities to bring, people together and kind of create that glue in communities. So there's, it's sort of seeking out some of those real change makers, also working with some of the independents to sort of support them tap into funds. And, we've actively programmed lots of sort of meanwhile spaces where we've been able to kind of sort of work with, we've offered the space free for a period of time, and then naturally some of the smaller organisations have taken that on over time.
Great stuff. And obviously collaboration is key at the end of the day, isn't it? Alex, getting our empty high street stores obviously is obviously imperative, as we know. But regeneration from the bottom up does have its challenges. Is there a new generation of high street entrepreneurs coming through? Who are they? Who's impressed you? Where are they? And what's their USP?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question. So outside of the obvious answer to that question, which will be about categories, are we expecting competitive socializing or are we expecting more coffee shops? There's also something emerging in terms of the kind of almost the attitudinal profile of the entrepreneur that's successful, particularly in this tech-enabled world. you know, so where you've got access to a lot of the tools. It's no longer about necessarily being the best business person in every single sense, but you've got to have that unbelievable drive. And it's about really getting to the core of what we've always been good at on high streets, and is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to be an entrepreneur, is just focusing on the trade.
Yeah.
You know, so people who are really exceptional at cutting hair, cooking food, making the product, whatever that might be, in a world where we can actually enable those businesses to get the rest of it done far quicker, cheaper and easier than ever before using AI. So if we're in a world where that exists, one of the first parts of that question is like, and we get this, we ask this question to ourselves a lot, where we get these businesses apply for competitions to win space in shopping centres and high streets for our incubators. And we're like, how do we select who's the right business for this? Well, one part of it is, what's the right offering to suit the needs of this particular catchment area, to complement the existing tenant mix and augment it? But the other part of it is, how do we get under who has that real deep entrepreneurial like drive, passion, and just commitment to almost run through a brick wall if it required it to make it work, because it's never going to always be easy. There's always going to be challenges. But on the other side of your question here, you know, we see that some of the old, you know, chunks of high streets will start to disappear. You know, and we've seen this already. You see this, what we call information services. So much less banks, you know, banks consolidating into banking hubs. It makes too much sense, you know. Commoditized product retail. So product retail that doesn't provide anything over and above actually what you can already find online, likely cheaper at probably quite quick delivery times. But we are seeing a real resurgence in some forms of product retail. So it's not like product retail is dead by any stretch. So retailers that are thinking and rethinking how they use the space, less necessarily about just stocking it high and selling as many as possible, but turning their space into amazing experiences that give their brand an amazing touch point while being joined up with their online offering, being much more of an omni-channel business from the start. And then you look at actually some of the real growth categories on high streets, you know, and Soapbox this morning, I don't know how many of you were listening into this, but it was a real sort of cross-section of really interesting stories of trends going on, from businesses that are all about giving back to the community and ethical consumption, to businesses that have actually built, 2 million followers on Instagram before taking their first unit, to businesses that are activating their physical space with connected social media experiences. And so you've got all these different types of new ways of thinking about using space, and rather than just, I've got a space, I'm going to sell as many products and services as possible, is how do I attract, entertain, and ultimately get the attention of your end consumer, because money will flow.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And also, what you can't buy on Amazon also works on the high street. So I guess that's why we've had a proliferation of barbers and nail shops and charity shops. But I want to name, Alex, who's impressed you? Who is impressing you right now in terms of entrepreneurs up and coming?
Oh, names?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Come on.
Well, look, firstly, I mean, Soapbox, I don't know if you saw Soapbox today, but a few of those brands pitched on stage.
Anyone in particular?
Yeah. I mean, look, Spud Bros are just absolutely, and they just come with such deep authenticity around what they're doing.
So if anybody wasn't at Soapbox today, what?
They basically, they've built a huge social media following around selling potatoes, but it just comes from the two founders, the two brothers. They're like, they just really exude the brand in every single sense. And they really are ambitious. They've got a big vision around bringing potatoes to everybody. And potatoes done well. We see this in lots of F&B categories. Do something slightly unique and niche. Yeah. You bring your personality to life in that brand. It's fantastic. We've got a whole range of brands we're supporting now. We've been rolling out this Hello Thriver proposition where we're working hands-on with them. One of those brands actually sat on one of these panels with me at some other event and did such a great job, and is just such an authentic entrepreneur as well. And we've helped him transform from basically being an urban streetwear brand into almost a platform to attract urban youth audiences back into shopping centres. So he's almost, and building completely different relationships in terms of his pop-up partnerships with the landlords that we're working with, because he's doing much more than just providing a little bit of service charge coverage and some income. He's actually attracting and engaging an audience that's very hard to reach in new ways. Okay. And doing exactly the kind of thing. Really comes with deep passion about what he's trying to do here. But the guy's working part-time in another job, works through the nights. I'm getting emails from him at 2 a.m. And the sad fact is, that is kind of what it takes in the early days.
Yeah.
You've really got to put the hours in.
Yeah. And I'd like to say that I think the potato is the king of vegetables. So I wish them all the best in their endeavours. Tanisha, the trend for multiple uses in a single space across the day are becoming more popular, aren't they? You know, why is this? Can you tell us about, you mentioned to me before, Corner in Dublin. What are they doing, and what other examples are there of this?
Can you hear me okay? Right. Yeah, so I believe that the future of the high street does lie in these multi-use spaces. And Corner, the example I mentioned, is a brand new meanwhile space in Canada Water. And during the day, it operates as a cafe. It has a food court. People use it to work there. It's like a pseudo co-working space. They have a vertical farm as well, and I just read on their website that it's the largest commercial vertical farm in London. And the food that's grown there is used in the food court, which is also great. And they also have the Minecraft exhibition right now, which is very popular as well. So multiple uses, culture, food, and in the evening, it becomes a live music venue. So you can go and listen to artists over the weekend. So that's an example of day to night time use. And another example, and this is not local, this is from across the Atlantic in Miami, is the Design District. I wonder if how many people have visited it, but I visited it earlier this year, and I was really amazed at how successful that scheme was. So for those of you who don't know, the Design District, it's basically a couple of blocks of high-end fashion outlets, so your Louis Vuittons of the world. But what they've done intelligently is introduce high-quality public realm within those high-end luxury brand. So the experience is not about going and shopping at those luxury destinations. It's about experiencing that high-quality public realm, and there's a lot of public art. And it's art that people can climb on, so you'll see children playing. They double up as parks, and then there are food trucks, there are coffee shops. So it's called Design District, and the retail being the heart of it, but it's the public realm that brings people in. And I find that it's a really good example and something maybe we should look at on this side of the Atlantic as well.
For sure, absolutely. Faye, nightclubs are opening up for co-working space in the daytime. So we're talking from day to night, but night to day equally as well. Do you have any examples of this in your area?
Not particularly that I'm aware of. I know when we had a chat, that I've seen examples out there in London where it's, basically optimizing space. So a nightclub, obviously, will be used for the evening economy. However, it's kind of a dead space during the day. So I think there's some nice examples I've seen where, it's been brought back into use during the day for whether it's exhibitions or co-working or whatever. But
does it work as a space?
I think what I have seen more of a trend of is this sort of multiple uses, even in retail spaces. Yeah. So a shop may be operating, as obviously a shop during the day, a lovely boutique. But where I've seen real success stories is with local owners who are needing to kind of make the most and drive more traffic to the venue and create, again, that kind of ecosystem, and then partnering with other retailers to do, special events, organising, very kind of elevate the experience, basically. So they may do a pop-up with a number of other brands, at least weekly. They'll, I think, sometimes throwing a bit of money at it, kind of creating this lovely experience where, it might be a champagne reception and a panel, but it's looking at, I think, more creative ways of bringing people into the space, which then obviously fuels that, that particular business, but the wider economy. And then I think something else I've seen in the borough and elsewhere is where, this sort of clustering effect between retailers and their neighbours, and this sort of, the sense of how everyone can kind of club together and create more of a kind of a collective model. Again, whether it's weekends and people sort of joining forces to kind of drive that critical mass and economy of scale in an area.
It kind of makes sense, really, doesn't it, at the end of the day? Why wouldn't you, really? Now, I'm aware that time is marching on, but I do want to touch on AI because I think we have to, really, don't we? Artificial intelligence is obviously huge. We know that. And this new tech is enabling the high street really to transform. We know it's revolutionary. What trends are you seeing in the retail industry when it comes to AI and what we can expect in the future? Can I just have a snapshot answer from each of you? Because I'd then like to throw to the floor for any questions. So, Alex, why don't you start us off on
Happy
AI?
to. So listen, the future of work's playing out in front of our eyes right now. And so the big thing we've been really focused on here is how do we build AI for good for the high street? So what does that mean? For us, it means getting to the crux of one of the big challenges Save the High Street's seen over the last 5-6 years, which is small businesses very good at the core of what their business is about, but they can't wear every single hat. So how do we build a team without the humans for small businesses that can't afford a human team? So actually, rather than get rid of jobs, which is what everybody's scared about, we're talking about this industrial revolution level shift, how do we actually give small businesses that feeling of having a whole team at their fingertips at any moment in time? And what's phenomenal when you're on the inside of the businesses, and what I've been watching it myself firsthand for 6 months, is so many of the individual jobs that used to take us time and money can now be done at the click of a button to a quality standard that's indistinguishable from a human with little to no marginal cost. It's a significant shift. It's not an incremental move. It's a leap forward in the economics of business. And for us, it's about how do we empower the small guys to be able to use this technology to become not just competitive in the future, but actually help people build much better businesses and better experiences of building businesses, rather than getting bogged down in all the things that really dilute their attention. So for us, it's how do we really focus this in a good way for the high street, and how do we work with local authorities and asset managers and landlords to be able to bring this to life for small businesses around the UK.
I mean, it can be a little bit daunting for some, can't it? The whole AI subject matter. It's so overwhelming, and it has so many strands to it. People can be frightened of it. I know I am a little bit, being honest. I don't really understand it in great depth. And I don't want it to replace loads of people's jobs, because I want people to be able to work. But if you can obviously save costs as a small business, save time, it just makes sense, doesn't it?
Lisa, I've got the same thing. AI ethics is a huge topic area. And even on a personal level, I mean, sort of right in the middle of it all, we've focused so much of our attention on this in the last year. I also have my concerns around the future of the world as a result of this. Don't get me wrong. But what I recognize as a pragmatist is that it's here. And if we don't put it to work, we will fall behind. And as a small business economy, we have an opportunity, as I said, not to make a little step forward, to jump.
Yeah, it's exciting. It is exciting. Right, thank you for that, Alex. I'm going to move on and ask if anybody in the audience has a question or would like to share any thoughts from today's panel. Please put your hand up, and we have a roving microphone that will come to you. Anybody? Are you all being shy? Have you fallen asleep? Okay, no problem. I've got one final question. Oh, have you got one? Sorry, I can't see you. The lights are so blinding. Hello, would you like to stand up and say your name and company?
Oh, I didn't know about that. Okay. I agree with the panel about changing the high street to the way it's supposed to be and be eclectic, culturally attached to the area where it is. But one thing that has not been touched is pop-ups, but seasonal pop-ups. So landlords don't seem to understand it too much, especially the big landlords, where we have could be changing seasonally. I have a seasonal product, which is gelato, but there's other things. It could be swimsuits, could be jewelry, and especially a young entrepreneurial person that wants to come into the business world doesn't have the capital to do a 5 years or 10-year plan. So maybe having a look at changing the high street on 3, 4, 5, 6 months contract to change things around.
So very short-term leases to allow flexibility.
Exactly.
Like the same way you're saying day to night is the season to season, week to week, and that dynamism.
We actually funded a Meanwhile space where we put public funding into an old property to bring it back to life, and I programmed in over 2 years a range of pop-ups, and it was mainly retail, but there was also culture, all sorts of creatives, community organisations, and we offered that to the community for free. And then, again, it's testing and trialling. It's giving them that, appetite and, sort of exposure, so they can then go on and perhaps take the risk with their own units. And having done it the other side of the fence, I have a small collective, and I've taken on spaces in shopping centres where we touched on it before, the space issue. And developers need to, activate those key spaces. And I think turnover rents is another big thing as well, where there is that leverage, I think, sometimes with landowners to do a deal. But it's just having that conversation. And I think, it's again where agents can support with that process.
And consumers want it as well at the end of the day. They want seasonal pop-ups. It's exciting, isn't it?
And it's a good opportunity for emerging brands to test ideas. And I think Lone Design Club are here, and they find solutions for emerging brands. So it's worth chatting to them about pop-ups.
Brilliant. Thank you for your question. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there because we've gone slightly over. But I'd just like to thank our fabulous panelists, Tanisha, Alex and Faye. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. And I hope you've enjoyed the sessions today and you've got something useful out of it. That's it for today. And, now it's drinks time, really, or meetings time, whatever you prefer. Drinks will be served on the ground floor, at the bar and on the terrace from 4 o'clock. Do feel free to stay and network. And thank you very much for your time.